Hi, guys. So, a lot of you probably know I'm directing a documentary about a very legendary, iconic music Houston institution called hashtags. It's called hashtags. You guys have probably been to hashtags. There's like a hashtag on the front of the building. In honor, yeah, right. In honor of this club hashtags, this story is called Goth Girl. The fall of 2003 was full of firsts. It was the first time I started attending college, the first time I got put on academic probation from college, and the first year a friend of mine drove me to 300 Westheimer and introduced me to classic numbers, not hashtags. I was 18 years old, and all I wanted to do was dance. In fact, my whole life, all I ever wanted to do was dance. But growing up, I discovered that my dancing brought more laughter than acceptance by my peers. So I skipped the majority of school dances, including my senior prom, because I was no longer interested in being around teenage dickheads who laughed at me. When I started attending college, I decided I was going to start living a more exciting life than the one I had at home, where I wasted hours on my laptop playing with Photoshop. But I wasn't exactly drawn in by radio advertisements on top 40 stations that tried to lure me to clubs like the Roxy. I knew I didn't fit into those kinds of places, and I was too young to go anywhere else. A boy I befriended over the summer named Pedro talked to me at length about numbers. He described it as an all ages club with a less sleazy atmosphere and better music. He also tried to convince me into believing that the club was full of vampires. I was pretty naive back then. Finally, one Friday night, I went with Pedro to Numbers. I was expecting to sit around and watch everyone else dance due to the ever present fear that I was too much of an awkward loser to fit in. Of course, that's not what happened. I walked in and I saw a room full of all kinds of people, young and old, dancing happily to the music. Pedro was right. It was nothing like the other clubs I had been to. Within seconds, I was on the dance floor, and from that Friday night on, I was hooked on classic numbers. I was obsessed with this new subculture I had discovered, and for once in my life, I wasn't being laughed at when I danced. The more I went to numbers, the more fascinated I became by one dancer in particular. I nicknamed her Goth Girl because when you're 18 years old and you see someone with pink dreadlocks paired with tall platform boots and a black leather ensemble, you assign a stereotype that you think sums up who they are. So she was there every Friday night dancing near the coat check. Her body moved to the music like a pinball that launches and hits every target on the first try. I so badly wanted to be just like Goth Girl. I wanted my body to move to the music the way hers did. In fact, I started studying her dance moves every time I saw her and tried to, mimic them as best I could. Every Friday night became a master class in numbers dancing with Goth Girl as my instructor. It didn't matter what the song was. One minute it could be something by New Order, the next minute something from Front 242. She was on fucking point. I told Pedro about my dance crush on Goth Girl. When he finally saw her, he agreed that there was something special about her, and we both began to look forward to seeing her every time we went to numbers. I thought about approaching Goth Girl, but I never gathered the courage. How do you tell a complete stranger that you're a fan of the way they dance to Skinny Puppy? I couldn't even bring myself to ask her what her real name was. One Friday night, Pedro and I went to Numbers, and Goth Girl was nowhere to be found. We checked all corners of the dance floor. We looked outside. We even went upstairs. Even though we spent every Friday night at Numbers, we never went upstairs because we didn't know what was upstairs. We always assumed it was like a VIP section reserved for people to snort lines of coke because those are the things an 18-year-old thinks about. During our search for Goth Girl that night, we discovered it was just another place for people to sit and hang out. Months passed, and still there was no sign of her. She was gone. How could she leave when I still had so much to learn from her? Once I realized that Goth Girl was never coming back, I started dancing near her spot in the coat check. I could never be the great dancer she was, but I still tried. I even spent most weeknights at home practicing to Numbers mixtapes that I made. After spending almost every Friday night at Numbers for a year, the place started to feel like a home away from home. It didn't matter if I had someone to dance with or not. I was out there moving to every song, even when the dance floor was sparse. I wouldn't leave it. This was the only dance floor where I felt accepted and unafraid. When I turned 21, I traded in my Friday nights at Classic Numbers for drinking at the bar with the friends I made in college. Soon after, they started teasing me about going to what they would refer to as scumbers. Instead of telling these so-called friends to go fuck themselves for making fun of my dance home, I agreed with them that Numbers was lame. From then on, Pedro stopped inviting me out on Friday nights because I often rejected his invitations. I said, the magic we experienced at Classic Numbers just wasn't there anymore. It was all gone. The older I got, the more I started drinking and losing sight of the person I really was. I realized that I couldn't approach life with the same confidence that Goth Girl had, a confidence that I envied. When I was dancing at Numbers, I didn't care what people thought about me, but during the rest of the week, I struggled to maintain that outlook, and I was self-conscious of every decision I made. But as time went on and I grew up even more, I spent less time at the bar and even less time with those shitty friends I made in college. Eventually, I met my fiance. When I told him about all the nights I spent at Numbers, I explained to him that it was more than just a nightclub. It was one of the few places where I could go and feel like I wasn't alone, even if I didn't know anybody else in the room. Next month, I'll be turning 30 years old. To this day, I still listen to a playlist full of all of my favorite Numbers music when I'm at work. Pedro and I got back in touch, and he's even going to be the man of honor at my wedding next month. Today we talked about plans for my bachelorette party, and we both agreed that it should be on a Friday night at Classic Numbers. Maybe if I'm lucky, Goth Girl will be there too.